Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick and welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening Woman. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. Who is the awakening woman? She's a woman who's seeking a greater possibility in her reality and looking for solutions. She knows being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If she can transform herself, she can change the world. Her conversations will introduce you to talented women who will speak to your spirituality, your sensuality, and your soul. They share their stories and explain how they are in service to the world. So let their words in these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest on this week's Her Conversations is nutritionist and yoga teacher Lenise Brothers. She uses her expertise to focus on women's menstrual health and sugar addiction. During our conversation, Lenise talks about the way that we can use foods to support our experience during our monthly cycle, the 5 different types of PMS she's discovered through working with her clients, and also how to best overcome sugar addiction. Also, if you've ever had discomfort after eating, listen in as she shares some breathing and yoga exercises to help you ease that. But as always, I begin by asking my guests. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel you're most her?
That's a great question, actually, and it's not something I think about a lot, but I definitely noticed that. So I was recently on holiday visiting family in the Bahamas, and this is something I'd known about myself for a while, but whenever I'm in the sea, I always feel just a sense of just this beautiful energy around me, and I'm definitely someone who loves the water. But what my most peaceful moments that I think back on are kind of laying on my back, floating in the sea. So, I have a few memories from holidays in Mallorca where we've gone to the beach and I've gone swimming and just floating and looking at the sky and just kind of being aware of my place in the world and, putting into perspective that I'm just a person floating in the sea in this big earth, and it kind of puts everything else into perspective for me. So that's where kind of my energy feels its highest. And I think also just on a day-to-day level, I have a lot of practices that help me increase my energy and make sure that I'm spreading my energy in the best possible way. So I'm a yoga teacher and I have a daily practice, and that's really important for me to feel grounded. And I notice in the days that I don't do it, and if I don't incorporate breathing alongside of it, I do sort of feel my energy changes. I get angry easier, and I don't like how I feel. So a daily yoga practice is really, really important for me in that respect.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And I want to always find out about the women, the work that they do. But first of all, it's always interesting for me and also for the listeners to find out how your life actually led you to do the work that you're doing right now.
So it's been a bit of a long and winding path to get to where I am right now. I'm a nutritionist and I specialize in women's health, hormones, and the menstrual cycle. And, for writers, they always say, write what you know. And when I was training to be a nutritionist, our tutors always said, specialize on what you know, what resonates with you. And I thought of my own story, and I spent a lot of years with really bad period pain, heavy periods, anxiety, depression. And over the years, I had experimented with using food, using different lifestyle changes, exercise to try to get to the bottom of what was going on with my body. And finally, the few things and then I was working in advertising in London for a really long time. Various things happened that started to get me to think about moving away from this field and starting to think about what else I wanted to do. And I kept coming back to health and working with people. And I knew that I wanted to work with people in some way because that's always been something that I've been interested in. I'm very interested in people and what's going on with them. And I find that I'm the type of person that people always tell things to. So what I thought, well, maybe I should be a psychologist. Maybe I should look into being a psychotherapist. But then I kept coming back to food. And then, so I decided to retrain as a nutritionist. And then thinking about what I was going to specialize in, my thought was, okay, well, what about everything that you've done for yourself and changing your menstrual health and knowing that it women don't have to feel this way. And so it was a long and winding road, but eventually I started to bring all the pieces together. And so that's why I do what I do today, because I know that the pain and the hormonal upheaval and the emotional roller coaster that so many women experience every month, it doesn't have to be, it's not normal, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I've done all of this work on myself. So I have firsthand experience of everything that I've talked about. So that's kind of a long and winding road to how I got to where I am today.
That's perfect. Thank you. Something that I wanted to ask you again is if you can think back to the education or the advice or the guidance that you received as a young woman when you first started your cycle, how much of it do you feel was relevant in terms of it was like equipping you to understand what was really happening, or how much it was rooted in fear, or how much did you have to kind of find from your friends and magazines, which, you know, I think for most of us, we kind of like we piecemeal our information together, and then most of it is like, you know, especially the wording that's used about your cycle and your periods, it's, you know, the curse, or it's just like the most derogatory, fearful thing that we go through, but yeah, it's a necessary thing, you know. It's how did you start to unpick the information that you were given in order to then create wellness within yourself and then be able to forward it to other women?
So it's funny you asked this because I was thinking about this yesterday. I didn't really get that much of a menstrual education. My period started, I got given a box of tampons, and then it was kind of like, off you go. And then my periods were really, really painful. And eventually my mom took me to the doctor, and then I got prescribed really powerful painkillers that I needed to take every month, every time I experienced this pain. But in parallel, my mom she had fibroids, and she had really heavy, painful periods. So that's what I saw. I saw pain as being normal. And then I saw my grandmother she went through the menopause really badly. And I have vivid memories of her having hot flashes and always being sweating and being hot. So what I saw of menstruation and what happened afterwards was kind of it was a state of turmoil. And then I was experiencing that myself. And so over the years, it's only in the last kind of 5 years that I have really unpicked this and realized that what we see and what our norms around menstruation we've normalized pain, and it doesn't have to be this way. And it's kind of like cobbling things together, understanding more about the body, and knowing that if something else is painful, so if we have a really bad pain in our head, we wouldn't just accept that. So why do we accept 3 to 4 days every single month of excruciating pain and just chalk that up to just being part of a woman? So unpicking it has taken a while, and I know that I don't know everything. I have a lot more to learn. No one, we're still discovering things about the body, so no one knows everything. But um, it's been really, really eye-opening. And then also having conversations with my clients and the various women that I speak to on a day-to-day basis, and hearing their stories of their first period and how their menstrual health education, it's been really eye-opening, because you also there's health norms that we learn about, and but there's a cultural side of it as well. And some cultures, they view menstruation as being really dirty and unclean. So there's a lot that still needs to be unpicked around all of this.
When you in particular spoke about your mother and spoke about your grandmother, and one of the things, when I was just making some notes of things that I wanted to touch on with you,
Yeah.
and also, for me, understanding things like moving forward and just like general healing, and we're all going through awakenings in different ways, is really looking at how things like emotional trauma and ancestral guilt and things like that impact on the body. Because in reading various different things, in particular Queen Afua, if is looking at how a lot of the time there's a lot of kind of anger and emotional pain that then gets lodged in the body, and in particular in the womb, that a lot of the time can manifest in things like cysts and fibroids. How have you found any of that in relating to your clients, or even yourself?
Yeah, I think when it comes um to health and with food, it's never like, what I know is that when a client comes to me and talks about, I want to use food to change this particular aspect of my health, it's never just about the food. Especially with women, there's some trauma that needs to be worked on. So we and that's there's sometimes I work with clients and I come to the limits of what I can do with them, because I come to the limits of what I'm qualified to do. So I have to refer clients on. So recently, I had a client who came to me because was every day she would have at least 3 or 4 rounds of diarrhea, and we looked at what was going on um, internally. So what was going on with her gut health, her digestive health. We made a lot of changes, but then as she became more and more comfortable with me, and she started to open up more as we went through our time working together, she started to talk about the trauma that she had experienced in her childhood. And I know from research that trauma, adverse childhood experiences have a huge effect on anxiety, and that anxiety has a huge effect on gut health. So you can change someone's diet and you can have a positive effect that way. But if they're in a constant state of anxiety because of the thoughts that they're creating, um, for me, that's the limit to my practice, and I need to refer people on. But I do see things like that a lot, where people don't realize how what an impact your thoughts have on your body, your experiences have on your body and your health. And even just on a very simple level, women just always having this kind of negative soundtrack in their mind about, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm stupid. It has a really limiting effect on then what they think their ability is to do certain things, because they're limiting themselves by their thoughts. So what we know about the body is that everything is connected. Nothing happens in isolation. So it is it is fascinating to think about trauma, and especially ancestral trauma. So we know that research is showing us now that, so Holocaust survivors, uh, people who have were whose ancestors were slaves, they you can see through their in their genes the effects of that trauma. Um, and so, for example, with Holocaust survivors, their their ans- their um their descendants are more likely to have genes that will predispose them to putting on weight because of that trauma where the body was in this forced starvation. Then their descendants, they learn through the genes that they need to hold on to whatever they get given into, from a caloric point of view. So yeah, it's a fascinating area.
Thank you for that. It was just interesting to hear your take, and also because you meet so many women, then
Yeah.
you've got a record of seeing it coming from different sides, and then even to go deeper and to talk about how um, culturally it's specific as well, when you've got women who come from the line of like slavery or Holocaust survivors as well. So thank you for
Yeah.
that, because that gave me a little bit more. When I was looking again into what you do in particular about period health and just period knowledge as well, can you talk more about the different types of PMS? Because I mean, we've kind of come with the bits of information that we know that this is the way that it is. Like prior to your cycle, you're going to have like PMS, and we kind of lump it under one thing. It's like it's this
Yeah.
way, but for myself, I recognize that I go through the craving stage, and I allow it to, and I just kind of allow it to happen. That it's like, okay, these couple of days, it's like chocolate and sugar and whatever I need is on,
Yeah.
and I kind of allow that to be. But I see that you've actually identified like 5 different types. How did you come to like discover this?
So I've seen that through my research, and what I see with my clients. Generally, you can group the different types of PMS into 5 areas, and I think what with that, like when you put together that sort of classification, it helps women understand that what they're experiencing is quite common, and they start to understand that actually they're not alone in these areas, but also like having cravings isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's understanding what those cravings mean. So commonly when we think about sugar cravings, it might be like if chocolate in particular, this is quite common to hear, okay, well, actually, that's probably magnesium that is needed in the body. When hear women talk about they really crave like crisps and savory things, generally that can be a sign that there's an issue with um, the balance of sodium and potassium in the body. So it's about those sorts of things. I like to put out that sort of material on my social media and my website so that women have an idea of what actually is normal, and what isn't normal, and to start for them to give a name to what they're experiencing. Um, but then also know that there is something that they can do about it, because we hear, oh well, just before you get your period every month, you're supposed to be moody, you're supposed to be crying and in tears. You see it, a commercial with dogs in it, and you're supposed to be weepy, um, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And I think the one of the most interesting areas, most interesting thoughts I've had in this area is this, and sharing this thought is that you can go through your menstrual cycle, the however long it is, 28 days, 35 days, whatever, and it can just pass by you. Your period doesn't have to be this big event. You don't have to have emotional upheaval right before your period. It can just be something that is just you get your period and that's it. And it just can be as every day as getting up out of bed and going to it just can just pass you by. But that idea is quite shocking to a lot of women, because it's these cultural norms that I talked about earlier, that pain and emotional upheaval are just part of being a woman.
Thank you about that, because I only started to look at it when I saw you break it down, because the misunderstanding is that prior to your cycle, you're going to go up or down, and you could kill somebody, and it's this kind of almost like extreme and untamed female psychotic behavior that you have to go through, and it's you've kind of just brought it down and normalized it, and just say it can be one of these things. And also, in terms of using diet then to actually have support the way that you move through your cycle, how can we in our own way start to do this, recognize what foods and what nutrients we need, and actually what food to pull from in order to kind of see ourselves through that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to do is to start to have a look at what you're actually eating. And I think that food diaries are a really nice way to do this, to give you a true and honest picture of what you're actually eating, but actually what you're not eating. So I find that they think they eat healthier than they actually do. And then when they start to write things down, they see the snacks that have come in, the mums maybe finishing off their kids' extra chips, or the birthday cake at work that they forgot about. So writing down what you've actually eaten throughout the day, and doing that for 7 days, and giving yourself a very true and honest picture of what you're actually eating. And then going into that and looking at, okay, well, actually, how many vegetables am I eating each day? How many portions of vegetables? Because again, I see that people don't actually eat that many vegetables. I look at food diaries all the time, and there are people who go the whole day without eating a vegetable. So you could have someone eating a bowl of cereal in the morning, and then maybe having a croissant and a coffee. And then at lunchtime, they might grab a ham and cheese panini or toasty, and having some juice. So thinking, okay, it's juice, so that's healthy. And then maybe for dinner, they might have a spag bowl. So across the day, that's you have the orange juice, and then you have the tomatoes from the spaghetti bolognese. That's not enough. But again, this is where the food diary comes in, and giving people a really realistic, honest view of what they're actually eating and what they're not eating. And then from there, giving yourself a challenge of every day eating at least one more portion of vegetables than you already are. So it could be that, so for lunch, you might say, okay, well, instead of the ham and cheese panini, I might get a vegetable panini. So it's these simple changes that then start to make a difference. And then every week, adding in at least one more portion of vegetables. So for dinner, so you might you might say, okay, I'll make my spaghetti bolognese sauce from scratch, and then I'll add in some spinach, a couple big handfuls of spinach, and then just these easy, simple changes that then start to build up over time, where you actually think, oh, well, actually, I'm craving some vegetables. And this is what I see a lot, and I hear that once you start to make these little changes, the palate changes, what you want to eat changes, and you start to crave fresher, healthier things. And it doesn't have to be expensive. So, I follow this lady on Instagram. She's called Bites by Becca, and she's a student and she's a vegan. So she doesn't have a lot of budget. But what she does on her Instagram is she puts in her stories, she every time she goes grocery shopping, she puts it all out on the table, and she puts the price of everything that she's bought, and she's buying mostly vegetables. And I think it's really interesting because people think that vegetables can cost a lot of money, but they don't need to if you're shopping smart. You can also buy frozen vegetables. And actually, because those vegetables are picked and then frozen right away, they can have more nutrients than fresh vegetables that may have been sitting around for a while. So to answer your question, um, if you are experiencing issues with your period, the first thing I would say is to look at your diet, be honest with your diet, start to add in more vegetables, but know that it doesn't have to be expensive. You can do this in a cheap way by even going to the market stalls, buying those bowls that they have on the market stalls, going to the grocery store at the end of the day when things are marked down. You can pick up a lot of really nice things that way.
That's great advice. And, as somebody who has been vegetarian, I've phased through veganism, but very much meat-free. I used to live with some vegetarians who rarely ate vegetables. And it was like a complete surprise to me because they called themselves vegetarian, and they were vegetarian because of their religion. And yet when you saw what I was eating, and I was one who was just not eating meat because I lived in their space, and the transition for me was really easy. But then the difference between the color of what we were eating, so I had this kind of rainbow of things, and their food was mainly brown. I was shocked, really, to see how it was possible to be a vegetarian and not eat any vegetables, aside from maybe a potato or something.
Yeah. I mean, I see that a lot too, and I actually I have firsthand experience of that because I was a vegetarian for about 15 years, and I was the worst vegetarian. I mean, I lived basically on tortillas with a bit of spinach and melted cheese and salsa. And that's what I would have for dinners most days. And it was really, really poor. So I know exactly how bad of a vegetarian you can be and how easy it is. Especially now you can get so many junky vegan foods, vegetarian foods, but just because you're a vegetarian or vegan doesn't mean you're healthy.
No, I've seen it firsthand, up close and personal. I just be like, okay, I eat more vegetables than vegetarians, and all I was doing was extracting meat. But I wanted to also ask you about just the different conditions as well. There was one, I want to get this right, premenstrual dysphoric disorder.
Yeah.
Which, as I understand that you're talking about, it is like an extreme end of PMS. How common is that?
I think the stat is something like about, off the top of my head, I think it might be about 5%, anywhere between 1 to 5% of women worldwide experience this. And so what it is that the form of PMS is called PMS depression, and PMDD is a very extreme form of that type of PMS. And women who basically, what happens is that women can experience it right after they ovulate, midway through their menstrual cycle. And then as soon as they get their period, they start to feel better. And so what's happening from a hormonal point of view is that after you ovulate, your body starts to produce more progesterone, and it starts to produce more estrogen. And that rise in hormones, some women, they cannot handle that rise in hormones, or they're dealing with an imbalance of hormones, of estrogen and progesterone, and their body is very, very sensitive to hormonal changes. And so after ovulation all the way through to their period, so that could be anywhere from about 14 to 10 days, they start to experience a sense of real lethargy, um, exhaustion. They don't want to go out. They don't want to see people. They have incredible mood swings, get very angry. On the very extreme sense, some of these women, they start to have suicidal thoughts. And so it can be, there was a woman recently, um, she went missing, and she had PMDD. And so it was quite, and the people who her family talked about it, and she said that they said that, you know, when she after she ovulates, she does experience these kind of suicidal thoughts, and they were really worried for her. Um, and this condition is becoming more, it's being talked about more. There's a lot of great um, social media sites, that accounts that are talking about it and raising awareness of it, because this is kind of part of this idea that has been spread that women are just moody cows.
Hmm.
But if you're experiencing depression or suicidal thoughts, you don't have to live with that. That's not being a part of being a woman. And it's something, if there is a lot of help and support that you can get, and there's a lot of things that you can do to change the way that you feel. You don't have to live with it.
Thank you. And just thank you for kind of like saying as well, you don't have to be a moody cat, because there's
Yeah.
so much, I mean, like even women describing other women, you know, when they are going through their cycle, or they're experiencing that, but being able to identify it, being able to see that it does have a name, you know, just kind of squares it in your mind and go, okay, this is something that is actually real.
Yeah.
And it's not just me going crazy. It's like my body is going through all of these changes. And if you think it just does that every month, you know, like 28 days to 35, it's not really a long period of time to be going through the gamut of all of these hormonal changes. So you can feel like you're spinning, you know, because it can switch from literally day to day, you know, when you have these internal changes. I wanted to as well just talk to you about sugar because you've taught so much about sugar in yourself, and as most of us will know, like trying to remove sugar from your diet and being aware of where the sugar is hidden is almost like a detective game, because even if you're buying like shop bought and shop prepared foods, even savory things will have a level of sugar on. So how can we start to identify where the sugar is, and how can we gently remove sugar from our diet to be sugar free, so that and then not kind of fall back into it, because it is like a trap, and isn't it like it's more addictive than crack? I've heard reports of that. I don't know how true that is, but it kind of sounds good when you're trying to go through your own stuff. It's like I can relate, not that I've ever been addicted to crack, but I just know the sugar loop that I can get into. So how can you help us move through that? Because also when you think of the way, you know, you were talking about how advertising will portray certain images. It's always this thing about this lonely woman in her flat who's having a hard time at work, or her boyfriend has just dumped her, and then she sits down and she'll eat like a tub of Haagen-Dazs or you know, the chocolates, and it'll be like her own like solace of just like feeding herself with sugar. How can we just like remove ourselves from all of that messaging?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple of areas to look at. So the first area is really going back to the idea of the food diary, and being really honest with yourself about how much sugar you're actually eating, and then looking at what you're actually using the sugar for. So is it a habit? Is it you feel after you have a meal, you feel like you need something sweet to round off that meal? um, then, or is it, are you finish eating and you're still full? So then we have this idea, okay, we have dessert after a meal. So then you're still hungry, I mean, and then you have something sweet. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. as long as you're eating it for the right reasons. It's something that you want. You're not feeling like you're depriving yourself, and you're only eating enough so that you get to the point of being full. And then when you're full, you stop eating. But then there's also then asking if you want something sweet and you think, well, I'm not hungry, so why do I want this? Is it emotional? Then if it's emotional, then it's something that you need to start to unpick. Is this a tub of Haagen-Dazs acting like a substitute for a conversation with a friend? Is it acting as a substitute for some really hard work that I need to do on myself? Is it acting as a substitute for something that I'm trying to avoid? Then that's where the work begins. And that's where it becomes quite hard, because you're right, we grow up with these images like the Bridget Jones eating a tub of Ben and Jerry's, singing all by myself, and so we associate, heartbreak and loneliness with sugar and feeding and needing, some to fill that emotional hole. But starting with being really honest with yourself about why you're having those things can be a good starting point for then the work that you need to do moving forward. But then we talked about the sugar cravings that happen before some women get before they get their period, and how it's typically associated with nutrient deficiencies, or it could be about actually not eating enough of the right things. So sometimes I see women who they eat a lot of carbohydrates. There's nothing wrong with carbohydrates, but they have a diet where they're eating a lot of toast, oatmeal, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for dinner, and there's no balance between protein and good fats. And it's that balance that helps fill us up and can reduce sugar cravings. So you have a plate that you move from having a plate that is just a big portion of pasta with some bolognese sauce on top, to a plate that is about 50% vegetables, lots of protein, good quality protein. Then you have some high quality complex carbohydrates, and then you have good fats. So you have things there that take longer to digest and help you feel full, and then can help reduce actual physical sugar cravings. The emotional cravings are different, but if you have that sweet tooth, eating differently can make a huge difference. And then the last area is, you mentioned sugar and foods and hidden sugars, and I think this is actually really problematic. So you read labels. So I was recently on holiday in Nassau, Bahamas, and they have a lot of their food is imported from the US. And so I'm reading labels, there's sugar in everything. There's sugar in bread, sugar in ketchup. I mean, we have the same issue over here, but it was particularly eye-opening because you see different brands. So a fun thing for me to do on holidays, to go to the grocery store and explore different brands and different foods. So I naturally will read the labels, and there's sugar in everything. So if that's something that you're concerned about, I would really recommend starting to read labels and start to understand what's in the food that you're eating, rather than, I know that people have a really strong affinity for the brands that they've eaten for a long time, the brands that they've grown up with. But an important part of changing your diet and changing your health is to be really aware of what you're putting in your body. So reading your labels and knowing the ingredients is a really important part of that.
And there are two questions that have sprung out of that. Firstly, if someone is transitioning from reducing, like the white sugar and even the hidden sugar, but they still have that need to just have something sweeter on the tongue. Have you got kind of some ideas of alternative, better sugar sources or other things that can be used to add that kind of sweeter taste to food if they feel that they're lacking in that sugar, or they just need that sugar taste more so than the hit that it gives the body?
So, for example, if you're used to having chocolate at the end of every meal, having a piece of fruit can be quite nice. I mean, right now, especially because there's so much beautiful seasonal fruit, like peaches, nectarines, plums, cherries, all in season right now. And when fruit and vegetables are in season, they taste so much better. Um, so, what's another example? Dates are really nice. So having one or two dates instead of having a whole bar of chocolate is nice. Um, but then also, if you're going to have, so for example, you go out for dinner, and then it's your birthday, and you have cake. Taking the opportunity to enjoy the cake and slow down and really savor what you're eating rather than just shoveling it down, because that's also what I see is that people eat really quickly and they're not savoring their food, they're not chewing their food well, and they're not giving their body enough chance to, like, the signals from their stomach to their brain to signal that they're actually full. They're not giving their that process enough time to take place. So they still think they're hungry. They start to crave sugar. So,
and what is that? Is that like, is that 20 minutes? Is that the, like 20 minutes it takes for the signal to kind of, if you're eating in a mindful way?
It varies depending on the person. It depends on what you're actually eating. Um, but the rule of thumb that I like to talk about with my clients is so chew each bite at least 5 times. The ideal is 10. I mean, there's clinics in Austria where people go like for a kind of a detox spa.
Is that the Mayo Clinic?
Yeah.
I've heard about that years ago. Yeah. And they say, isn't it like 20 or 50? You should make 40. It into. Oh, was it 40? I knew it was somewhere there. You should like turn it into you should wait until whatever you're eating and turn that into a liquid. Because the reason I used to years ago waitress in a steak restaurant, like a famous steak restaurant, and every now and I'd eat steak, but it was interesting to watch when people would like order, like they had like the best cuts, but it would take like 5 or 6 bites where these men would literally just like chop it. It was usually the men that ate in this way because it was like it was in a busy part of town where people had like an hour to like come down and eat their lunch and go. But they would you'd see them literally like kind of put this bit of like usually rare steak in their mouth and just kind of like what do they call it, tenderize it with their teeth for a couple of seconds, and then you'd see this kind of like lodge of like meat kind of like going down their necks. So it slowed me down on my meat eating there as well. But so they say 40 times, right? Okay.
But I think that's quite extreme. I'd say for the average person, a mindful eating practice would be chewing each bite between 5 to 10 times, but also taking the time to notice what you're eating. So putting your fork and knife down in between bites. If you're having some dessert, putting the spoon or the fork down in between bites and notice the taste of what you're eating. Notice the company that you're with. Have that conversation, slow yourself down and make it into a bit of a moment, but check in with yourself. So check in with your hunger and your fullness. And when you feel full, stop eating. And that's hard because, again, we talk about cultural norms, and a lot of us have grown up with this idea of clean your plate. There are people starving
in Africa.
Yeah. Waste not, want not.
Mm.
And, I had this conversation with a client the other week where I had to say, well, if you're cooking at home, just and you take a portion, you eat that, and if you feel like you want more, have more. And if you don't finish that second portion, then put it back in the fridge and have it for leftovers. And she really struggled with that because of this whole waste not, want not idea. And I said, well, but you're not wasting anything because you're putting it back into the fridge for leftovers. And when you go out for dinner, if you don't finish something, you can get a doggy bag and you can take the rest away. And that was really, really hard for her because she had grown up always you have to finish your food, empty your plate.
Mm.
So it's not this is not an easy one, and I know we've moved away a little bit from the sugar question, but it's all really linked.
Yeah.
And this is where I come back to what I said earlier about it's never just about food. It's about how we eat food. It's emotions that we have connected to food, and other things that are playing out in our mind and our body.
And just a quick one relating to the eating is, what is your take on drinking while you eat? Do you kind of like sip and eat, or do you wait until you've eaten and then you drink afterwards?
I wait till I've eaten and then I'll drink afterwards. I might have a few sips, but what happens is that when you're drinking, while you're eating, you're diluting the stomach acid that you need to help break down the food and to get the nutrients from the food. So I will, and that's just something that I talk to my clients about. Just, if you're having dinner and, don't gulp water beforehand. Just, if you get thirsty, if you're eating something that's a bit salty, have something to drink, but don't drink throughout your meal. Wait till afterwards.
And one last food question. I was watching an interview with Dr. Sabi's family, and they were talking about protein and mentioning that he was never really about protein at all, saying that the body didn't need protein. And I've not had time to actually look into it any further, but it was just an interest, because especially when I shared with my family that I was changing my diet and going more vegetarian, more plant-based, it was the meat eaters in the house were always going, the protein, where are you going to get your protein from? It was like a matter of life or death. So it was interesting then to have his family that was saying he was never about protein. He didn't think protein was an important part of, or a necessary part even, of the diet. So what's your, just hearing that for the first time, and I'll send you the link as well so you can do it. What is your thoughts on that, because protein is such a big one that everyone waves about? It's like, where's your protein coming from? You'll die without it.
Well, I mean, I have to read, I'd have to watch the interview, but from what I know of studying biology, studying nutritional science, is that most food has protein in it. If something apart, there are things that are pure carbohydrates like sugar, table sugar, that has no protein in it, but things that are pure fat like lard or oils, but most things have proteins in them. So protein, you need it for muscle repair. So this is why when people are sick, burn victims, they need to increase their protein intake, because that's how the body makes new tissue. So to hear someone say the protein is not necessary for the body, it makes me wonder if I'm trying to be delicate here, what the depth of their understanding of nutritional biochemistry is. Because you have different types of proteins, and some foods are more protein rich than others. And what is true is that most of us eat more protein than we need, and there's a huge emphasis, a marketing emphasis, on foods having protein in them. So you see Mars bars with protein, protein shakes, everything, every label is emphasizing the number of grams of protein in them. But what's the average woman needs about 44 grams of protein in a day. The average man needs about 55 grams of protein. And it's very easy to get that amount of protein throughout the day without needing to have a protein shake. And this is actually something that I have clients who do a lot of exercise, and then they get told you have to have a protein shake even on days when you're not working out. And I have to kind of break all of this down for them, because it's only elite athletes and someone who's on a very intense program of muscle building that needs to have that much extra protein. And so, but the rest of us, most of us eat, even vegetarians tend to eat more protein than we need. So you think about things like, if you're eating a vegetarian, eating a lot of legumes, chickpeas, lentils, fermented tofu, those have a lot of protein in them. So even vegetarians tend to have more protein than they might need. So that's kind of my point of view on whether we need the point that we might not need protein. I don't agree with that.
No, it was the first time that I'd ever heard it, but I'll send you the interview, because I was like, okay. But, with you just saying, well, if you're eating right, the protein will come, without you even noticing from the foods, then it may be that. But like I said, I didn't have time to kind of like look into any other thing prior to speaking to you, because I wanted to be a little bit more informed. But I just thought I'd kind of lay that to you. But it's been such a enlightening conversation with you. Just like I've learned so much, just from this little time. And I just wanted to ask you the questions that I ask all of the women that are on Her Conversations. And the first one is, what is the best piece of advice a woman has ever given to you?
Okay, so there's two. So there, and this wasn't given to me directly, but it's something that I really have internalized. You can't be it if you don't see it. So I think that was Maya Angelou. And I really think what I do is really powerful in that respect, setting an example as a woman of color in wellness, because there aren't that many of us. And so for me to be doing what I do and being open and being just keep putting out content and getting my point of view out there, I think is really powerful, because women come to me and they say, one of the reasons I wanted to work with you is because you look like me, or I really resonate with what you're saying, and because you look more like normal, you're not a blonde, willowy model looking, holding an apple. You know what I mean?
Of course.
And so that kind of keeps me going. And then the other one is that I think I saw this on Instagram, but I really connected with it. Is that there are people out there with fewer qualifications, less experience, but more confidence doing the thing that you want to do. And I keep thinking about that, and it really drives me, because I know what I'm talking about. I have a lot of experience and education, and there are these influencers I see on Instagram, and I kind of I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. I actually had to message one of them a couple of weeks ago, because she was talking about how food rots in the stomach. And I said, that is completely incorrect. If food is rotting in your stomach, that's a sign that something is really wrong. You have cancer, because food, if your digesting is working as it should, your food should not be rotting.
Mm.
in your stomach. And she was saying that's why people need to stop eating meat, because meat rots in the stomach. And I said that's wrong. That is wrong. And she has like 350,000
Mm.
followers on Instagram. So it's really dangerous, seeing these people with no nutritional qualifications at all talking about these sorts of things with utter confidence, and then just saying, because loads of people messaged her saying that she was wrong, and
Mm.
she just put something on and said, "Oh, my bad." So
It's
yeah.
like I've just given you some information that's like going to frighten the light of you, but it's wrong. My bad.
Yeah, yeah,
Like you say, it is interesting and at the same time really concerning that
yeah,
influencers, I don't know, does she have a few pictures of her in a bikini with a green smoothie? Because that's always going to attract the numbers, and then you
yeah,
can just like send out this misinformation, and those that are not prepared to do any more research will then kind of take that as gospel, because one, they look at the numbers and they see the clout she has, so it must be right, and
yeah,
unfortunately we're still really numbers driven, and
yeah,
the status will always come from something, and we're going through an era where it's about your likes and your followers, and
yeah,
the more that you have, the more relatable, the more it seems that that you're talking about, the more people will buy into you, as opposed to someone that's got maybe like 800 or like a couple of thousands, without realizing that their stuff is. And usually, because one of the things that I do is I help people with their online presence, and a lot of the time it's the women, as mainly I work with women who have something really real to say, real life story, real life qualification, they've lived through it, are the ones that are really reticent about putting themselves online, and feel that they're overdoing it or pushing too much, when I'm like, you need to do that, because the space is open for somebody like you with your information and your integrity to go through. But they're the ones, like you say, who are really like, maybe I'm doing too much, am I putting out too many posts? And then you've got the ones that have got X amount of 100,000 that are just like posting like 6-7 times a day without a care, and are getting all the people, funneling people blindly down a path of like ignorance, basically double
yeah,
ignorance.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's concerning.
Mm, mm. But I suppose you just have to feel whether something feels right. When you're reading it, does that make? Why would things rot in your body, like you say, unless you've got like a serious illness, or in fact that you're a corpse and your
Yeah.
digestive issue, your digestive part has stopped working altogether. And then talking about other women, like what woman would you say represents higher energetic resonance to you?
That's a really interesting one, because there are so many women out there that I work with
Mm,
who I have touched my life, who um, there's something about their energy has resonated with me in some way. Um, so it's hard for me to pinpoint to just one woman. Like, I learn something from everyone that I speak to.
mm.
I learned so much from my clients. um
If you
yeah,
don't
I don't
have one,
know.
that's fine.
Yeah, yeah, I know I don't have one particular person.
That's fine. I mean, like, I'm the same. Like, there are always kind of like the obvious names that will always come up.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but then again, like, you talk to all of your clients and you learn something. Every time I talk to another woman on this podcast, I'm like learning something else. There'll be another name or another book or another thing that I want to find out about, because they're deepening my knowledge and my awareness of what it is and what it takes to like be a woman, and
yeah,
all of these different women who have all their different levels of expertise, that if we kind of equip ourselves or just kind of listen into their information, will give us a little bit more knowledge and awareness about what it is and how we can move forward as women. So it's
yeah.
all good. There's no one person, but sometimes you have one
Okay.
that there's check, you answer the question in the correct way, which is good for you. So what are your favorite self-care rituals or practices?
So eating well is really important for me. I noticed that, so when I was away, I I'm not strict about my diet, in the sense that have to eat certain things, or I'm not on a strict kind of diet for a medical reason, but I like to take care of what I eat. And I noticed that when I went away, I was just kind of very relaxed about it. I just ate the foods that I wanted to eat. I ate all sorts of Bahamian foods because, I grew up with that kind of food and I wanted to have what I wanted to have. But I noticed by the end of it, my energy was down. I was felt quite sluggish. So I knew that when I came back to London, it was time to just get back into my routine of eating lots of vegetables, starting with my morning smoothie. And then yoga is a really important practice for me. I practice every day. I use breathing throughout the day to just get me back into myself, and to control, and because I can be an anxious person, and breathing really helps me control that.
Are
And
there
then
any, oh, sorry to cut, but I just wanted to ask, are there any like either a yoga pose that you would recommend or a breathing practice that you would recommend that, when you've eaten something and you're just feeling slightly nauseous, or you can feel that maybe it's not digested in a way that would make you feel comfortable, that you can just kind of share or suggest that we try?
yeah, so the first thing is any sort of twisting pose. So any poses where you're twisting your torso either to the right or to the left, um, they're beneficial because it kind of gives the intestines a bit of a boost. So you might notice that if you're a bit gassy or a bit constipated, things start to get a bit easier. Also, laying on your back and bringing your knees into your chest, that can be really helpful if you're constipated, especially, or you're a bit gassy. um Squats, are really really beneficial as well. From a breathing perspective, so when we are breathing has a really important effect on our nervous system. And when we have there's different parts to our nervous system, but in terms of the nervous system that affects digestion, we have a nervous system that's called the sympathetic nervous system, that is connected to being anxious, fight or flight. So that when you're running for the bus, that your pupils dilated, you're focused on one thing, and your body is thinking that it's in survival mode, so it's going to shut down digestion. The most of us are in that mode for most of the day because we're dealing with so much stress. So taking a simple deep breath in and deep breath out, and then lengthening the time of the breath. So going from an inhale for one, an exhale for one, and then an inhale for two, exhale for two, and going up to five. So laddering it can be really beneficial for digestion because you're moving from that sympathetic fight or flight nervous system to parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. And digestion then becomes a lot easier.
That's great, thank you. And it kind of reminds you, the exercise that you're talking about with the lengthening of the breath just reminds me of so many things that are yoga based, and exercises that I do within yoga, that I'm one that really likes breathing exercises. Now it comes from like being a singer, when I had to learn certain exercises as a singer to like strengthen my capacity in terms of like breathing in and being able to hold the breath and relax the breath. And just even in times I've been more able to, if I'm in a situation where normally I would react and kind of go, it's just like, and just kind of hold it there for a bit, and before I respond, or if I choose to respond at all. And it's amazing what a simple breath can do, the difference that can just like take on whether you think you're going to go down the road of where you're being brought to or not. So thank you for that. And just talking about what's coming up for you. Can you talk about any new programs or things that you're about to launch, or what you have out there already that you want to promote?
Yeah, so I'm working on a few different things at the moment. My signature program is a 12-week program where I work with women to change their eating habits, to increase their energy, to help them improve their hormone health, their menstrual health, and women who who are interested in that, they can register for a 30-minute, I call it a hormone health review, where we talk about what's going on. And then I tell them about my programs. And then we talk about if it's a good fit to work together. Um, and then I'm working on a book at the moment.
Good.
So that's taking up a lot of my time.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of the two. It's summer holidays, so my time is kind of squeezed between work and childcare. So I'm not trying to take on too much right now, just to be mindful of my own energy and not going into the new school year feeling depleted.
Perfect. And where can people find you? Like, tell us your social media handles. I would recommend your people latching onto your Instagram, because even the posts that you put up there are just so informative. Just like on a bite size information, you can learn so much. They're so clear and so informative. But just let everyone know where we can find you.
Yeah, so my Instagram is Eat Love Move, and my Twitter is the same, and my Facebook is Eat Love Move Nutrition, and you can also find me at eatlovemove.com.
Perfect. So thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for all the information that you've given. It's just been like a shade over an hour, but I've learned so much about nutrition and menstrual health as well, that I'm sure anyone listening to this is going to have it's going to wake you up to a little bit more, because it's one of those areas, like both of those areas, menstrual health and food, are areas that we're not informed about, and we kind of just like struggle our way through life to try and just like keep on the side of wellness with our ignorance, or actually start to make a difference in informing ourselves. And you're doing like such a great service about just opening it up, and there's so much more that could be spoken about, but this is great as a start, so thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks to Lenice for joining me on this episode of Her Conversations, and thank you for listening. You can discover more about me by visiting my website, carolmaywhittick.com. Follow me on social media under Carol May Whittick, and my Instagram is Casmic. That's at CAZMICK. Also, you can follow me at Her Life Academy on Instagram, which is the Instagram account of the monthly instruction and inspiration platform for awakening women, which will be relaunching later on this year. I'd also appreciate you leaving a comment, liking and sharing any episodes, and if you subscribe, you'll be notified as soon as a new episode is published. So thank you again for listening, and until the next week, have a great one.